From Nutrien Ag Solutions, I'm Senior Atmospheric Scientist Andrew Pritchard with your Canadian Prairie weather story for Thursday, February 20th, 2025. Go ahead and jump in here. We got some extreme cold across the region right now. We're going to talk about that temperature pattern stabilizing though as we head through the next week or two. And then at the very end of the video, I've got an update on the spring outlook here as we head into March, April, and May. Some of our ensembles here have updated the last few days. I've got some updated guidance from NOAA and the Climate Prediction Center as well. As we get started here Thursday morning, a lot of cold air in place across the Canadian Prairie and the northern plains. We're starting to see this air mass finally begin to moderate across the region. I called out the Dakotas here, parts of Nebraska, as having a frigid morning right now on social media, and a couple commenters here in the area let me know that it's actually quite mild compared to the last few days there. So comparatively to me down here in the Midwest, it's still pretty frigid across the prairie into the northern plains, but those temperatures are finally starting to stabilize. And we'll talk about a further warming trend as we head into the weekend and much of next week. Now, with this current pattern, not a lot of moisture in place across the region. We have some snow across the higher elevations in British Columbia, some snow down in the central Rockies, and then some snow across portions of the eastern United States. No big precipitation across the prairie right now, just a lot of cold air. Again, those temperatures anywhere from minus 20 to minus 30. A lot of cold air, it just doesn't hold very much in the way of moisture. So really cold, dry air mass in place across the prairie, at least for the next several days. So we look at the NAM model, we'll bring this on back. We'll talk about the end of the week into the weekend. Not a whole lot in the way of organized precipitation. Maybe you look for some flurries in Calgary as we get toward the end of the day today into the overnight. Not much in the way of, significant accumulation from that. Not a disruptive snowfall. Same will be true across southern portions of Alberta and Saskatchewan, late in the day Friday into Saturday morning. Just some flurries, some very, low impact light snow across the region, and that is it over the next 48 to 84 hours. This is all the way through Sunday evening from the NAM model. Any snow that accumulates is along and north of Highway 16. That snow is very light. We're talking about a couple of inches of snow here. And then in the higher elevations here across southern British Columbia, in the Rockies here is where we could see some snow as well. But across the prairie, pretty quiet week as far as precipitation goes, pretty quiet end to the week into the weekend. Now we'll look at the upper level pattern here. We'll do it in a couple ways. First, we're going to look at the 500 millibar winds as we head through the next 15 days or so. And it's kind of a disorganized pattern. I just let this play in front of me, kind of letting my eyes blur out and look at this pattern as it animated itself over and over. And I was really kind of just looking at this, and it's a pretty typical transitional pattern here, where we've got a lot of moving parts. The jet stream is going through a bit of a reorganization here, as we just delivered a lot of cold Arctic air into a lot of North America. So the pattern is kind of resetting as we go through the next week or so, getting into early March, a bit of a transitional period here. So there are disturbances kind of within the flow here over the next 7 to 10 days, but none of which really likely to trigger a big impactful storm across the prairie and really across much of the U.S. until we get into the first few days of February. We're kind of going to be in a bit of a lull as I just kind of maybe jump over here looking at the 500 millibar height pattern. You'll see some ridging building in here. This is going to allow that temperature pattern to moderate across the region, allowing those temps to climb back to seasonal averages, if not a bit warmer than average. And much of the flow across the jet stream where it's going to be strongest will be displaced here across the Pacific Ocean. So not really feeling a lot of the impacts here across the prairie. This will be more impactful across the Pacific Northwest, parts of British Columbia, coastal areas here, and then higher elevations likely to pick up more in the way of moisture here as a couple of atmospheric river events kind of run up and down the coast. But this is not a pattern that has big lows ejecting and bringing significant precipitation to the prairie. It's just one that's going to allow those temperatures to, again, warm up here as we head through the end of February and begin to stabilize a bit. Now, does this mean that we're done with Arctic air masses making their way in? Well, if you watch the animation there, I just kind of spoiled it for you. No, we're not. We've got the European AI forecast system here and some of our ensembles suggesting maybe, if you look at the date up here, top right, we're talking about the last couple days of February, the first couple of days of March, maybe a quick hitting shot of some really cold air, but you notice this doesn't set up shop. It doesn't establish itself, and we get right back to where we're bringing in kind of, moderated Pacific air masses to the prairie. So those temperatures going to be a little bit more comfortable as we head through the next 2 to 3 weeks, potentially beyond, as we start to trend back toward a more spring-like pattern across the region here, I think, as we get into March. Of course, March-like spring across the Canadian prairie. Don't, misconstrue my words here for an early big warm up across the region. But let's just look at the precipitation forecast again. It's, there are disturbances in here, so it's not as if we're completely ridged out, but it's at the same time not a very impactful pattern for us in the prairie. So here's your Thursday, quiet. Here's your Friday, quiet. Here is your weekend, your Saturday, Sunday, a little snow along and north of Highway 16, maybe some light rain, maybe some drizzle, maybe some freezing drizzle along and south of Highway 16 as we go through the weekend. Not likely to be terribly impactful, but some locally slick spots possible. Maybe some rain showers here across southern portions of the Prairie as we go through Monday. Again, this is very, very light precipitation, but you see that warm up here bringing in potentially some liquid precipitation across the Prairie. This is taking us through much of next week now, and you're seeing not a whole lot. Interesting. So this is Monday the 24th. This is Tuesday the 25th. This is Wednesday, Thursday, and now here you see a more impactful storm. This is the one that potentially drags some cold air south as we get into, this will be February 28th into March 1st. So we're 8 days out there. This is a glancing blow from a pretty wound up low, but this one kind of skirts east of the Prairies. We talk about, more impactful precipitation, but this is the next kind of opportunity, and that's 8-9 days out there. You see the pattern reset there, nothing immediately after that. This is March 2nd, 3rd, 4th, March 5th. So there's a lot going on here with this pattern as we just look at the, North American continent and then adjacent portions of the Pacific and the Atlantic. But on the whole, the next 14 days, there's not a lot of direct impacts as it relates to the Prairie. So we see that here when we look at side by side. This is the European on the left, GFS on the right. Total precipitation from both models just run it all the way through the last week of February, the first week of March. So all the way to, March 6th, 7th, and 8th. And as you look at the Prairie here, we're talking about a trace to, maybe 5 to 10 millimeters of precipitation across the Prairie proper. So this is, again, a lot of little disturbances, a lot of moving parts. We have the, jet stream going through a whole scale transition across North America. But as we talk about the next 15 days, most locations across the Prairie get to see very little precipitation, just kind of more seeing the impacts being in the temperature, department. So here's your European and GFS ensemble. This is the probability of picking up half an inch or more of total precipitation between today, February 20th, and March 7th and 8th. Again, you look at the Prairie, pretty much nowhere getting up to that 30 to 40%, range. As we talk about a pattern that is just not likely to deliver anything in the way of widespread soaking precipitation, at least in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Now, don't take that tone and run it out too far through the spring season. We've got some updates here. This is from the National Multi-Model Ensemble forecast. This is the March, April, May precipitation forecast. And you see a lot of the Prairie in that white shaded color, but this is a fairly favorable look for us here with systems being forecast to come in across the Pacific Northwest and British Columbia and then running through the Prairie, and then kind of seeing that storm track kind of redevelop across portions of the Midwest, parts of the central and eastern Corn Belt. So as we go ahead and jump in and look at the European extended forecast, this is the European weeklies for the month of March. So this is not March, April, May like this was. This is March, April, May. This is just the month of March here, but you're seeing kind of neutral conditions across a lot of the Prairie, wetter across western Alberta, so Peace River, Grand Prairie up toward Edmonton down to Calgary. Higher chances for above normal precipitation with a near normal forecast across the Prairie proper. And then you have to extrapolate on this one. This is the European, I'm sorry, that is not what I meant to say. This is the seasonal outlook from NOAA, the Climate Prediction Center. This is March, April, and May. No, this is just March. I am really just struggling on this last slide. I tell you what, folks, I meant to grab March, April, May. This is just the month of March, but the outlook remains, mostly the same as we go through April and May. And what this shows me here is, again, a forecast that has storms coming in across the Pacific Northwest and Western Canada, at times bringing impactful precipitation to the Prairie. It's just going to be a couple of weeks before we kind of get there. Again, most of the models here showing a pattern that looks a lot like this with, generally ridging across the southern U.S., parts of the southwest U.S. with troughing upper level lower pressure across Western Canada, portions of the northern and western United States. This would, again, what this does not say to me is we're going to be launching into a pattern that has widespread drought across the region. So, my concern level for drought heading into the spring season here, lower than it has been in years past. Let's just finish up here with these temperatures, a little bit easier to handle. As we talk about temperatures getting above freezing, Calgary, those highs around 10 degrees at times over the next week, with overnight lows just dropping a couple degrees below freezing. Edmonton, seeing your highs above freezing, for over the next 7 to 10 days as well. Saskatoon, you're getting up to the freezing mark. Here it is in Regina, and then Winnipeg will finish up with you as well. So we'll talk to you again in about a week. It should be a warmer week for you across the Prairie.